Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ron.
Hey there, friends. If this is your first time hearing about the Win with Dice podcast, this is a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Calvin and I take a casual approach to the hobby, so on this podcast, we like to talk about the games that we run and the games that we play and the cool, wonderful people we get to experience the hobby with. If this is your first time kind of hearing about tabletop RPGs or specific tabletop RPGs, hey, welcome, thanks. And why don't you go? Don't listen to Calvin, he'll probably protest, but stop listening to this and go find some friends. Go find some friends, go find a table, go have some fun, and then come back and listen up. But if you are like a player at someone's table and you never GM'd before, like, hey, maybe it's your turn to play a game for your table and be the GM for that group.
Indeed. So this week, we are hopping back into Pathfinder. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the new Mythic rules that were introduced into 2nd edition by the War of Immortals book that came out just last year. We're going to get talking about some mythic monsters, some legendary entities that your mythical PCs can take on. We are going to start the mythic counter. But we're going to talk about some creatures and also how to build your own mythic monster to throw into a mythic campaign.
It's gonna be a lot of mythic today.
It really is. But before we get into all that fun stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week. Brought to you by me, yeah. Well, I was watching some videos on, it was mostly about like game design and like the way that video games are kind of structured and stuff like that, and the story of that, but kind of like extracting that to tabletop RPGs because like it's all games, it's all fun, and everyone's trying to have a good time, right? But yeah, so this week is the scene or an encounter is only as interesting to your table as the difference as the last scene or encounter. So let's say if you do have like a string of fights in a row, if they are kind of the same, like they're like fighting a bunch of goblins the entire time and the stakes are the same, or even if it's just a fight that it's fight after fight after fight, get exhausting and tiring and kind of boring too, right? I mean, there is like a build-up that you can put to have like a long string of fights or even just like a big social encounter, but really what people are really looking for is kind of like that back and forth where you do one thing and then you do something else that's different. So the idea would be you have a fight scene, then you have like maybe a role-playing scene, a little bit more narrative, you discover something, and then you're back to fighting again. And that kind of like loop up and down is what people are really looking for, I guess, as for a game. I mean, every time we have it, or even if it's like a string of serious moments, the serious moments are really good, but having a bunch of fun moments is also good too. But having too much of either like isn't the best for anyone. I would say things are too silly, then the stakes aren't enough. If the stakes are too high, then the game needs to be a little bit sillier. So having that balance is like, I think, the key to really selling a session.
Yeah, no, you definitely want to, like, because when those moments hit, whether they're serious or silly or whatever they may be, like, they're not going to have the impact you want if they just sort of blend into what's happening with everything else. For some of these games, like, the main chunk of the rules, or the biggest chunk of the rules, is on combat and stuff like that. But that's why you would then want to try to introduce new mechanics sometimes, just so you can spend, if you really want to do something with all those numbers on the piece of paper, just so you can use them for in different ways than just straight up combat, like chase scenes or challenge sequences and things like that. Keep mixing things up that way where you're still challenging the players, but you're not necessarily doing it just through combat.
Yeah, it also gives like moments for different types of players, different types of characters to shine, both players and NPCs, because, if you have somebody who's like an actor on your team, as in like the actor archetype, where they just kind of want to ham up at a scene, right? You know who you are.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, right? You need to get them the spotlight once in a while, and you do also have like the cool power gamers who like made a cool character that can just kick some ass, like seriously kick some ass. Give them the opportunity to go kick some ass, right? So you need to give everybody at the table equally the share of the game experience, because this hobby is really weird that it has so many faculties to it, where a normal game of any other genre is like a little bit of like, it's really focused, but in this game it's like, oh my god, like you're playing Maple Leaf Theater as well as like a crunchy tactics game at the same time. It's it's weird.
Yeah, and there are some games that handle that sort of thing differently. But yeah, as the person running the game, you got to make sure you have some balance so everything hits just the way you want.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's the tip of the week. Your scenes are only as good as the last scene that your table experienced. So switch it up, vary it up, and it would be a better, wholesome game for it.
All right, let's hop into the new Mythic rules for Pathfinder. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of a mythic creature that's presented in the book. There's a handful of them that are presented in the War of Immortals book, if you look through the Myth and Legends chapter. And they will come with their own stories, their own histories, and ways to use them in different levels of campaign that I think is really interesting. Because of the way mythic campaigns work, your players will progress by having done different mythic deeds. So these examples will have different possible mythic deeds that can come with these creatures. And if you are maybe hearing about this stuff for the first time, which is wild, hello, hi, we did cover mythic player characters as well a few episodes back, if you check that out. But essentially, mythic player characters have access to feats and abilities that go beyond what regular player characters can do in order to tell stories that are more like the foundations of legends. And mythic monsters sort of present those opponents or deeds that go beyond normal encounters. So the one I wanted to look at was one that has kind of been bouncing around my brain that I might use even in a non-mythic campaign, the Immortal Trickster. His origins come from ancient history before the spread of humanity. He is a spirit guide, as far as legends say. Spirit guides existed as the first attempt of the gods to create animals within the universe. They moved from the first world into the universe itself, which is like the material plane, and formed relationships with mortal creatures there. The Wanderer is to be part of that first generation of spirit guides. And depending on the legends told, he's either the coyote, the fox, or the raven. And you'll find that those are very similar themes that stick with the character, like those particular three animals. Originally known as the Wanderer, but more commonly known as the Immortal Trickster. Sometimes benevolent, but very often dangerous. There's actually a little poem that's in the book that I thought was interesting. The last part of it, of this trickster's parable, was, "Trust not that cunning old trickster. Unlike you, he cannot die. He may not mean you aught ill will, but his games are scarce survived." Which is sort of the vibe they're going with here. He may not necessarily set out to destroy you, but if you end up in his orbit, you might not survive the experience.
Yeah, because he can do a lot and walk away from it.
Exactly.
Well, you can't, right? Yeah.
And he's more interested in his games than anything else. So when not appearing as a coyote, fox, or raven, he can take the form of a man whose ethnicity is usually based on the local indigenous people. He'll often be wearing a cape of coyote fur, a hat with a raven's feather, and has amber eyes like a fox. Again, because like any good character, this guy loves themes.
Yeah, and low-key, he's kind of a hottie, so yeah.
I can see it. And yeah, there's many varying stories and legends told about him. There's some where he's smart enough to trick the sun itself. And there's some where he's foiled in trying to steal a cake by a keen-eyed auntie.
That's so good. I love the he successfully tricked the sun. It's like, what?
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. I love that. That I think is gonna be my next heist. The next heist game I'm gonna make is you guys are gonna have to trick the sun in some way, whatever that means.
Hey son, look over there.
I know. I just like to think that he's putting a crew together, and they're at the table, and it's going through the thing. Or it's he pulls out the blueprints. They're planning to trick the sun. It's just Ocean's 11D. That's what it says.
They're stealing from the sun.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, but he is known to seek out adventurers and thieves for heists and that sort of thing. Usually people will get pulled into his exploits, which they are not guaranteed to make it through. So in a campaign, he can be an ally that hires the players or acts as a resource, but he can also be an antagonist behind the scenes and maybe the players never even meet him directly, but they feel the effects of him. And he's sort of like drawn to like thieves, performers, and very noble heroes. Something the book does that I think is interesting is it specifies different stories you can tell at different levels of campaign. So with the Trickster at a low level campaign, which is defined as 1 to 7, the Trickster is too powerful to confront directly, and the PCs in general are not powerful enough to interest him in like direct combat. Instead, they're more likely to get swept up in one of his schemes. Like the players can be maybe guarding something the Trickster wants, or even hired by him unknowingly to be part of a heist to take something he wants. Like, I don't know, whatever possessions the sun has.
Oh man, he's definitely working with the moon. That'd be so good. Maybe you're stealing the moon from the sun. That would be pretty fun idea. Yes, perfect. I love it.
Stealing the moon is a very comic book plot.
I know, right?
If the player characters show enough potential, that might get his interest, assuming they survive all the unnecessary risks and twists that he will throw into the story. At a mid-level campaign, which is defined as 8 to 14, the players are going to be a bit more likely to see through his schemes, and perhaps even more likely to interact with the Trickster directly. There's more potential for combat at this level, which might reveal the Trickster's ability to just escape death, which we'll get into. So probably players should have a chance to sort of research who they're dealing with before they get into combat with him, just so you know, so it doesn't feel like it's their success is ripped away from them. Although again, as they're progressing through this, they are achieving mythic deeds.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure there's like tons of ways to just actually stop immortal beings from doing stuff. So like getting in the higher levels, it could even be like a whole thing where you have to stop this guy, or like they don't know that they're planning on stealing the moon from the sun, but now they figured it out and they're like, oh, actually we can't work for this guy anymore.
That's bad news.
This guy's real bad news.
And then when you get into the high levels, which are 15 to 20, the Trickster is like CR 11, I think it was. So he's sort of outmatched physically at this level, but he can still act as either, if he's an ally, he could be like a mentor or employer for the PCs, or as an antagonist, again, he could just be like a figure from behind the scenes. He is, again, the Immortal Trickster, so he's got enough resources and wealth and plenty of ability to create rivals for the party. However, if he is acting as an ally, he can bond with the player characters, and that can have its own interesting downsides as well. But yeah, I wanted to get into like the stat block, I guess, for the Trickster. In particular, a couple of things. One that I thought was very funny is that he's recklessly overconfident because he knows he's immortal, so he doesn't really care about most consequences. So whenever he would fail at deception, stealth, or thievery, if he would fail at one of those checks, he will instead critically fail, because his fumbles are, of course, going to be spectacular.
That's so good.
In addition, he has his main thing. Well, I don't know if I would say main thing, but one of his things is the Immortal Tricks, where if he's reduced to 0 hit points, he returns to life at full health and with all his powers and mythic points recharged after 24 hours. And mythic points are like a resource that mythic player characters or creatures can spend to do their abilities. He usually, but not always, returns to the site of his death, but he can basically appear anywhere on the same world where there are coyotes, foxes, or ravens. So he has a lot of ways to return, so long as there's coyote, foxes, or ravens on the same world. So you might have to take him off planet to fight him.
Maybe. Actually, that might be kind of fun to have, let's say, maybe even some like deforestation thing happening, right? Like where like you're wiping out like a bunch of natural habitat, and the Trickster doesn't like that, because if there isn't any of those things, like if something happens, he can't just show up here anymore, right? Like that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, he could. I mean, if the PCs are doing that or someone else is doing that, then he turns the PCs against them.
Yeah, but that could be like maybe like the level 1 to what do you say 7, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of lower adventure where he's not interacting with them directly, but like obviously you could start setting the seeds of like why this dude would be here, right? Why he's invested in this specific plot point, even though he's not directly like telling the PCs what to do.
Yeah, like I again, like I really liked how this book just helps inspire stories and stuff.
Yeah, they did a good job at that. I think they did a job at like translating like real world ideas and like the stories and stuff, and kind of distilling into something that's clearly Pathfinder-y, right? Like it's like you could just kind of riff off of this and put it in your own Fantasyland game.
Yeah, because there are a lot of cultures with like trickster myths and different figures that are meant to be like so clever they can outwit figures who are far more powerful than they are, that also have sort of a comedic side to them that can also turn very dangerous depending on who you are. So
yeah, lots of world religions and mythologies have trickster deities who are good or bad, depending on which side you're on of their tricks, for sure, which I think is always like a good thing. Not so much in the West. We don't get too much stories of those, at least not from like the Anglo angle. Obviously the like, you know, the Aboriginal Native Americans, they have lots of stories like that. They have a bunch of trickster deities and stories about that, right? So especially the Immortal Trickster is very pulling from that origins, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the vibe that they're trying to match here. And one other thing he can do is he can bond with mortals. So with this ability, he forms a bond with a mortal creature. So the mortal creature increases their current and maximum hit points by 10 while bonded, and they get a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls, as well as deception, stealth, or thievery, which is pretty good. However, every week that they are bonded to the trickster, the bonded mortal increases their doomed value by 1. And when a creature is doomed, the dying value at which they die is reduced by the doomed value. So, for people who might not recall, when you're dying in Pathfinder, you have a certain dying value attached to you, like dying 1 to 4 in general. And as you make recovery checks, if you fail, that dying value increases, and usually when you get to 4, you die. However, if you are doomed, that number is reduced by your doomed value. So if you're doomed 2, then you die at dying 2.
That's wild, because like he's like whatever he's doing, he's helping you, but also like because oh man, that's so crazy. That's so good.
And will he tell you this? Depends on what he wants. So he can bond with up to 6 mortals at a time, which I think in general will cover a party if need be.
So yeah, he can like lend out his power, but you can't like be friends with him for so long. Like
yeah, pretty much. This ability can't increase the doomed value above 3 on its own. However, while it is active, the doomed value cannot decrease. So
yeah, that's good. That's like a race against the clock kind of deal. I like that too, because like, I mean, if we're kind of spitballing like a storyline to steal the moon from the sun, like he could inadvertently enter in the contract with this dude, and then it's like, well, like you're bonded to me and like the longer you take, the more likely you're gonna die. So get to it, kids. Like.
Yeah, like, I do like the idea of a contract, as absurd as that is. It's just like, yeah, you really should have read the fine print. I did tell you, it was right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be like an oh, by the way moment. Like,
yeah, but I like that, that increase of your HP by 10, but those +2 to attack and damage rolls can be pretty good, especially at lower levels. But like, honestly, in general, with Pathfinder, any bonus you get onto an attack roll gets you like that one step closer to making a crit.
Actually, like 10 HP is nothing to laugh at either. Like that can be the difference of going down and staying alive. So I mean, you may not even have to roll that doomed value too. Also, like if you took toughness, like you can get like you can die a little bit later, so you can like hang with this dude a little bit longer. So yeah, there's like definitely ways to deal with that, as well as like if you have hero points, you can automatically succeed. You don't have to roll any dying checks or anything like that as well, right? So I mean, you could probably play it as long as you want, or like, you know, ride this train as long as you want. Yeah, I'm starting to make me feel like I wasted some of my Fae, like my Fae NPCs, like that I've created, like the Disaster Sisters. Like I think when we during the game, I had the players meet one of the old, I guess bad, but mostly just like not good high level Faes in my world, and I forced them to basically like do a thing for complete a quest for them, but I did it by threatening their new friends, but they didn't get anything out of it really. So next time I think I'm gonna use this idea and like get them to have some little bonus and also do the thing for them, but also make it be a detriment. Like this whole Doom thing is really nice.
Yeah, Doomed is a really interesting condition because I don't see it get used a lot, but using it here I think is really cool.
Yeah, and it's spooky, and you might not even have to roll on the table. Like not very specific characters don't really get touched that often, and honestly, like I can count on my hand how many times like Solroda has gone down and rolled a death saving throw. Like it's maybe twice, like for real. So
I guess I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, right. Doom. I don't think Doom really applies anything. It's only for death saving throws. So
yeah,
maybe that could be a cool thing to apply to like cursed stuff too, right? Where if you just this super cool thing is awesome, but also like you could die easier.
Yeah, which I don't know. I think it's cool. I like this guy. Just kind of caught my attention because I feel like there's different ways I could definitely slip this creature into a game without it having to be a mythic campaign. He does have like mythic resistance, which all of them do. They have like a high resistance to anything that comes from a non-mythical creature. But just remove that and he could be in a campaign wherever.
For sure. Wait, it's only resistance 11? That's such a small amount of resistance compared to how much damage that crit could do from a pretty well-armed fighter. Like,
oh well, if we're talking a fighter in Pathfinder, I mean, that's not a fair scale. I don't know if that counts.
I was like, only 11? Okay.
But yeah, the book also references a object he has, the Wandering Pipe, which is like, again, this mythic object. If you come into possession of it, you get a bonus to your deception checks, as well as a penalty to your stealth checks because it's just constantly smoking. A mythic character can spend a mythic point to fly with the Wandering Pipe, letting the smoke gather around them.
Nice. I love that.
And then the item itself, it can only be destroyed by the trickster himself. If it breaks somehow when it's in someone else's possession, it'll just like return to him. And I believe there is mention that destroying the pipe somehow is part of like defeating the trickster, or at least it could be depending on how you want to tell the story. And then yeah, there are suggestions of what kind of stories to tell with the trickster. Either again, like he hires the PCs for some sort of heist, or they just happen to be in his way. Maybe he bonds with a PC group, or he bonds with a rival group, which I think could be interesting, especially if the players back out of a job for him for whatever reason. Maybe he just goes to someone else, and then you got to deal with people who they would normally be comparable to the player characters, but now that they have more HP and they're getting bonuses on their attacks and damage. Yeah, there's even a suggested idea of like he's trying to acquire godhood somehow, because he's not like a deity per se, but he's been around pretty long and he is pretty powerful. So maybe, he just wants to move up that extra step.
Ooh, maybe he is trying to like not steal from the sun, but like, or steal the moon from the sun. Maybe he's just trying to become the moon. That would be kind of sick.
Ooh, moon.
He has to like, he has to like do something to get rid of whoever's currently the moon. Like, oh, that's actually a pretty good one. I like that one too.
I'm sure there's a moon deity. I don't remember who it is. Well, I guess maybe it's more like a, what's the word, domain thing, where there's multiple deities that have it under there.
Ooh, maybe he's just trying to become god and just have the domain of moon. That would be pretty cool, actually. That would be a pretty epic thing to do. Just shake up the domains in your world, like who controls what.
Yeah, that'd be that could be a whole campaign unto itself, a whole mythic campaign. Or even, I do also like the idea of this guy just acting as the benefactor for a member of the party. He is providing this power, perhaps unknowing, with the character not knowing the situation.
Oh man, what? Someone was being like a witch, and like they have like a fox like
Yeah. Like a fox
what's it called?
companion or a familiar.
Companion. Yeah, but like they don't know it's this guy. Like the entire time you had no clue that this dude was just like there, and he's like, yeah, you could like, because they always like, oh, their powers come from their patrons, right? And their connection to their patrons is their animal companion. But lol, your animal companion is your patron. Like, and he just all of a sudden turns into a guy. He's like, hey, I need a job. I need you to do something for me.
Like you've shown enough potential at this point. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's a really cool character. Like there is other stuff here that's like, there's like this mythical kaiju that's like basically a whole island. That I think is really cool. But I really like the idea of he's just like a powerful guy. If you were to get into a fight with him, if you're strong enough, you could win this fight. It's not like you're fighting, an island, but he's just very clever, and he has tricks, and he has ways out of everything. And he can offer you power, but you might not like the price of it. I like that idea a whole lot.
Yeah, because then it gives you like someone to talk to, right? Like versus like a kaiju, where you're just kind of like, this thing is too big to stop, right? It gives like a fun person to peg like a whole story around, right? Like our whole, initiating some chain of events that leads your players down to having a fun time, actually. So
yeah,
I steal the moon.
I have ideas that I want to use this guy for that I'm not gonna say, but I might say off air.
Oh my god, what if instead he was actually just trying to steal the moon from the sun, because the moon and the sun are dating, and he actually just needs you to do a meet cute to convince the moon to leave the sun. That'd be like the funniest thing. Where like he just believes he's in love with the moon. Oh, that'd be so funny.
Oh, okay. And what? He's trying to steal the moon for himself?
Yeah. Like he's trying to steal the moon's heart for himself. Like, but he has to pull off a heist and like steal the physical moon's heart because we're already getting weird, so we could just be a little weird too.
Fair.
It just basically just be like Persona, but like in Mythic Pathfinder. Yeah,
I'm into it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I don't know. The Mythic stuff gives you like the vibe of like where like things could just get kind of trippy. Like you get to like set scenes but that don't really make any sense. It can get a little weird because like you're dealing with like gods and deities and like planes of existences that mortals shouldn't be in. Right? So,
yeah, where things are just like living concepts.
Yeah, exactly, right? That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I like a lot of the stuff that the book presents here in these creature examples, but that one just, it gets a lot of gears turning.
For sure.
So, speaking of, let's talk about creating mythic characters. So the GM core book has rules for basically building monsters, and you just go through different steps, essentially, to create a creature. It sets a basis of, like, you start with the level of it, you have like a roadmap you can go down of what type of character it is, what difficulties certain things should be. Should it have like certain high modifiers, moderate perception, that sort of thing? Or you can just throw templates onto existing creatures. And that's sort of what the book presents here on page 168. It gives you a table of different things to add onto a normal creature in order to make it into a mythic creature. And we briefly touched on these last time we talked mythic stuff, but I wanted to go into a bit more detail with them and maybe look at some of these templates. I don't know if we want to try building a specific thing, like just grab a creature or throw a template on it.
I mean, is there like a specific thing that you like? Like a creature that you're like, every time you see it, you're like, yeah, I mess with this?
Ooh, I wish I had thought of something ahead of time, but what about a hag? What about a mythic hag?
Alright. I fucks with the hags.
I figured.
Ladies.
Let's go with a... Oh, should we go with the storm hag or should we go the winter hag? What are we vibing with right now?
Honestly... we could do the sweet hag. The sweet hag is so creepy. I hate it so much. Get it out of here.
Alright, let's do it.
No. I don't like this picture. Every time I see it, I'm like, no, she's just too shiny and weird. I don't like her eyes either. No, don't take the cookies.
Eyes are so disturbing. Alright, let's do it.
Alright, so she's level 4.
So a CR4 Sweet Hag has become involved in this mythic level campaign.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm like feeling like she makes pancakes.
But evil mythical pancakes.
Yeah, evil mythical pancakes.
Because this could be like a deed that the players deal with as they're going through their campaign, a lower level mythic deed, defeating this creature. But as far as mythic creatures go, there are different things that get different levels. The first one being mythic resilience or resistance, which are words that are frankly too close to each other for my liking. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to mix up the two. But mythic resilience, with that, a creature will treat its saving throw with an associated save as 1 degree of success better than what it actually rolled. It's not cumulative with other effects, except unless a creature rolled a natural 1 or a natural 20, but they can only choose one type of save at a time. So fortitude, reflex, or will, whatever it rolls, it will treat its result as 1 step higher. Or it can get mythic resistance, which is resistance to all strikes made by non-mythical creatures equal to half of its level. And if it takes mythic resistance a second time, it gets resistance equal to its level.
Okay.
So, looking at this creature, the hag already has a weakness to cold iron. I kind of think maybe the resistance might work better.
Like a resistance to cold iron?
Well, it's just resistance to non-mythical damage.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Well, cold iron will still be effective because then it'll cancel out the resistance as well. Unless it's like a mythical cold iron weapon, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, it would need to be a mythic weapon. At level 4, its resistance would just be 2. So if it's hit by cold iron, that balances out to still weakness 3. So still takes 3 extra damage instead of 5.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
So it's a little, maybe a little tougher than expected, but there still has a weakness to it. And then at 4th level, it gets access to a mythic power. And there's lists of different types of mythic powers. As the creatures get higher in levels, they have access to different powers. So at 4th level, it can either have a mythic skill, which for the cost of 1 mythic point of its pool of 3, the creature can attempt a skill with a +4 bonus. It's considered to have mythic proficiency, and this applies to 1 skill when this ability is gained, and another if it's 12th level or higher. So I don't know if this thing's doing much skill checks.
I mean, the only thing I think of is like deception, because it's a sweet hag, so it's really trying to like lure you in. So I mean, I feel like that would be it, right? It's either that or you're gonna make this thing like super athletically jacked, or it's just like this thing. You know, I mean, she's not natty, right? Like she's like.
Damn. Yeah, she does have high athletics, actually.
Well, she's basically just Taffy in evil form.
True. So it could have mythic skill or remove condition, where at the cost of a mythic point, it can just end 1 condition affecting it.
Yeah, that would be an easy way if this was more like a combat thing. I think it depends on how you want to set it up, because like having like +10 to like proficiency, it would be pretty high, I think. The deception and like trying for players to figure that out. I guess it just depends on like how you position this mythical sweet hag. Is she more of like the boss and is, you know, wormed her way into like dealing with stuff, or is she an actual physical threat where like that might be a thing too? I think the athleticism, if like, or like the skills would be cool, or like if it was the conditions would be, if I was a GM, I'd probably go with the conditions, just because like it's easier to, that's like an easier choice because it only comes up when you have a condition. You don't have to think about it beforehand. You know what I mean? Like, and Pathfinder is conditioned the game, so it's like you can't even spook her. She's like, actually, I'm never spooked. Never not spooked.
Yeah, it is the easier to keep a track of. I think, yeah, like if you're thinking about it like the combat, I think that would be easier to deal with. I was kind of leaning towards the skill one though, because I was thinking like the sweet hag like blends into a certain small town or something, but has secretly been like, I don't know, making kids into pancakes or whatever witch stuff witches do.
Making kids into pancakes. Yes. Okay, then yeah, just go with deception or something like that. That would be good.
And then like one of the mythic deeds the party has is like figuring out what's happening in this town.
Yeah, right. Like,
why is that pancake wearing a baseball cap?
What's that pancake? We have little shoes. Like,
and then yeah, like that's the story here. However, what we could also do is apply a mythic template onto a creature. So yeah, like again, you could just add these abilities onto a creature to make it a bit more of a threat. But if you want to, you can also put a template onto the creature, and these will make it more of a specific type of enemy. You have your ambushers, which will sort of lie in wait. They have their own lair, and they sort of conceal themselves and wait for a chance to attack the enemies directly. You have your brute, which are, they're very physically resistant and they're very tough and they have very powerful physical attacks. You have your casters, which I think might fit here, which will have like increased spell casting power, and they will sort of like, they'll probably be in play longer than most spellcasters and with higher spell difficulties. And your striker, which is sort of like a less, like not as strong as the brute, I wouldn't think, but more, it moves faster, like moves in, does damage, and then moves away. More of a rogue than a fighter.
A little bit more of a skirmisher instead of like a dude who just wants to weigh in to battle, right?
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking just straight up like caster was the one that made the most sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have any problem with that. So it just gets all of these abilities then?
Yes. So there would be a list of abilities under Mythic Caster. It uses the high spell DC and attack modifier for creatures of its level. So if you are building this creature on your own, when you are building a creature, you will have different, like for spell DCs, for example, you can put different types of DC in there. If it's a creature that should have a high or low or moderate spell DC, you can put that in. Similar to actually the Starfinder creature builder from first edition, which I also thought was very cool. So if you are building this creature, it will use the higher of the spell DCs and attack modifiers for creatures of its level. And if you're taking an existing creature, I would also just bump up its numbers to whatever those would be. Mythic Knowledge, where it uses the extreme skill modifier for a creature of its level. So again, just look at the table in GM Core, see what, if a creature is this level and it was really good at a certain skill, this is what it would use. So you take that value. A Mythic Power, which is the recharge mythic action. So spending a point, you can get an additional use of a spell. And then a Mythic Weakness, so it can't get Mythic Resilience and Fortitude. Oh, it also can't get Mythic Resistance. So I guess maybe Mythic Resilience in Will or Reflex? Probably Will makes the most sense.
Yeah, you could do that. Or you could Sherp. I think if we look at their skills, they have... I mean, it's pretty much even across the board anyway. Will is their highest by 1 point, so 1 point's not... I mean, like, the difference is not going to be that big of a deal if you chose to shore up the other one. But, yeah. Damn, bro, this Sweet Hag is built solid.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
And yeah, it's just basically that simple to create, like, a mythic enemy. It's sort of like the same way that you would construct stuff for a regular campaign. You just have to view things through the lens of, like, being a step more powerful. Especially the stuff that takes place, like, in between the bigger boss enemies. Just ways for players to earn their mythic deeds.
Yes.
And then the book does have an example of a mythic caster that I think is maybe a bit more metal than a Sweet Hag, because it's a mythic lich. But I think the Sweet Hag is scarier in a way.
I think it's just the idea that this lady's just made out of candy.
Right.
Like a lich being like cool and magical. Like, yeah, this is definitely a bad dude. But like just lady just all of a sudden is like, I'm made out of taffy, blah 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 blah. You're like, oh please no, get out of here.
Yeah, like one guy's like, oh, he's a skeleton dude and he's got armor and he's got a big book and a staff and everything, and the other is like, my eyes taste like mint.
Yeah. My eyes taste like mint. Come to my house, and you go to their house. This is like you're just eating pancakes, and all of a sudden you're like, "Why does this pancake have a bow on it?" We're like, I don't know. Like, you're like, "Oh, please get me out of this hell." At least a lich, like you walk up to their place, like it's shaped like a skull. The furniture has skulls on it. And you're like, yes, this is a spooky ass place.
Everything here
your
makes
grandma's
sense.
house. Yeah, you go to your grandma's house, all of a sudden she's made out of taffy, and you're like, please stop.
Yeah, but that's a problem for the mythic PCs to deal with.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know. I don't think I have anything else at the moment. I am curious what sort of characters other people would like to make. Like, if there is some specific creature in Pathfinder 2nd Edition that you really like, how would you, mythify that creature and make it more powerful? Something I do kind of wish the book had some examples of is more mythic deeds, and maybe those do exist and I just missed it. But similarly to the examples of deeds that it gives with the Trickster or anything else, like, here are some minor plot points that could work. Maybe some generic ideas of plot points that you could slip in, I think would be fun. They would have to be pretty vague, which I guess is part of why they don't necessarily exist here. But I would have liked some examples of that, just to get the ball rolling, just to get some ideas going.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I feel like now you could just take up like a myth book or something and read it and be like, oh, that seems like a cool idea. Like, Thor did this cool thing one time. I guess I get the players to go do that. Like...
That is true. You can just take them from literal myths and legends, or existing, I should say.
Some of them are wild too. Like, a lot of the African myths are crazy. A lot of the stuff that Anansi did was crazy too. Like, you could just do a lot. Like, there's just a lot to draw from, and especially from different cultures. I mean, I think again, Pathfinder is oddly suited to be more culturally diverse, and you can pull a lot. I mean, they try very hard. I mean, I think they try a lot harder, or at least they were the first people to try a lot harder in Fantasyland books to kind of bridge that cultural gap and like have, different stories being told, representing like different stuff instead of just like old England or whatever, right? Like, yeah,
it's felt a bit more obvious since the remaster. Certainly, that's what they're trying to do, especially in what was the name of the book? Monster Core. I think that was also apparent. And also, I was going to mention that I was thinking Anansi when I was looking through the Immortal Trickster stuff as well.
Oh, yeah. So good.
But yeah, if people want to check out the War of Immortals book, there'll be a link to it below. Gosh, we should really get a sponsorship with Paizo, huh?
It would be nice. But yeah, if you haven't picked it up already, go check it out. It's a cool book to have in your arsenal, even if you don't run a Mythic campaign. It's like such like a treasure trove of ideas to kind of pull from, and you can pick apart this book and use it however you like, obviously. But I think this is one of those things where you can really like hook a whole campaign around a specific aspect out of this book and just kind of run with it.
Yeah, for sure. There's even there's artifacts and spells that we haven't touched on too much yet that I think could be very cool.
Yeah.
All right, but I think that's gonna do it for the episode for this week. Again, if you have some creature that you think is really cool in Pathfinder, mention it below. And if you have ideas for what sort of mythic deeds could exist for this evil mythic candy hag, or sweet hag, I should say, drop those in the comments below as well on YouTube or on Spotify, because you can leave comments on Spotify, which is not something that a lot of people know, I don't think. I certainly didn't. But yeah, that's our episode this week. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. We've got a ton of other Pathfinder stuff going on. If you want to go back to previous episodes as well on the channel, there are gaming streams if you want to check those out. The schedule's been a bit wonky, but I will try to be a bit more consistent with it. But if you missed anything, you can always go back and check the previous episodes. I do also want to give shout-outs to people. If you're into the Lancer RPG, there's a whole bunch of Lancer writers and creators linked below. Check out Untold Stories Project for their ongoing Mutants Masterminds games. Check out Vault Companions for the Mass Effect game that I was on recently. And I think that's everything.
Yeah.
No, that's not everything.
I don't know.
Because, Ramon, you still have that game you're working on. You're still working on the Project Versus RPG, which is still going to be linked below, because I just put that into the document to make the description document.
Yes, I am working on my own tabletop RPG. Project Verse, if you're into fighting games or beat 'em up games, that's kind of the vibe of this game that I'm putting together. So yeah, there's a link to the website where you can download a copy of the playtest. It's on the 1.1 release right now, and go run a fight with some bad guys with your friends. There is some rules for narrative stuff, and yeah, the vibe is light and the fists fly. That's kind of how it works.
Indeed. Yeah. Go check that out. And I think now that's it. I'm gonna say this.
Okay.
If I forgot anything, I'll remember it next week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else we should say, or are we good to head on out of here?
No, I think we're good to go.
Okay. Well, for all of our mythical GMs and mythical players and mythical tricksters out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.